Welcome to Two Idiots and a Dog, Idiots Unleashed. Graham, are you actually there? You were supposed to do the intro this week.
Huh? What?
Damn it, are you working on a map again?
No.
You know we were supposed to record tonight.
I got D&D tomorrow.
D&D? What is wrong with you?
I live with you?
Okay, fair point, but hasn't my taste in RPGs at least rubbed off on you a little bit?
No, because you're obsessed with fiddly dice.
Yeah, well, your face is fiddly dice.
Yeah, well, your mom's face is fiddly dice.
That does not make any sense.
Neither does your irrational hatred for D&D.
My hatred for D&D is purely rational.
In any event, I'm Grim.
Who the fuck am I again?
Some idiot.
Probably. I think I'm an idiot named Zolgar.
Kaiju's probably around here somewhere.
Probably. She's probably laying on the sofa. Just a quick warning, this is an uncensored podcast, so you may hear adult language or other content not suitable for children, the workplace, church, or, frankly, human consumption. Especially if I'm talking about Dungeons & Dragons.
Especially 4th edition. Ugh.
I think I'd actually prefer 4th over 5th these days.
Oh God, who the fuck are you? Get out of this house.
Someone who's just tired of the bullshit of 5th edition? Anyways, this week our topic is tabletop RPGs. There's more than just Dungeons & Dragons. This was my idea, because, well, I'm an idiot, and also, in case you hadn't guessed, I don't like Dungeons & Dragons much anymore.
Shocked. This is my shocked face. If you have an idea for a topic for us, you can let us know on our Discord or social media, but you can only vote on the topic poll on Discord.
So, are you excited for Tucson Comic Con?
I can't get the time off work this year.
Your job sucks. Don't they know you have at least one adoring fan out there who would love to meet you at Comic Con?
I genuinely worry about that person.
You know, me too. You might be better off not meeting them.
But you'll be out there.
At least 2 days, and I'll have buttons to hand out.
We still have buttons?
Yeah, I ordered way too many of them.
So when is it again?
September 1st through 3rd.
And that's at Tucson Convention Center, right?
Yep.
So, how do people get a button?
First they gotta find me, and then they gotta ask me for one. I'll be posting a selfie in the morning before I head to the con so people know to look for my ugly mug.
But, more importantly, what I am sure everyone is dying to know, will Kaiju be there?
No, I'm not sure what Tucson Comic Con's pet policy is, and I don't think she would handle the crowds very well.
That makes 2 of us.
Now, roll for initiative.
Because the idiots are about to ambush your party while you're sleeping. Hi, guys.
You don't roll for initiative if you're ambushed while you're sleeping. You roll for initiative when you wake up.
Not in 5th edition.
Well, that's because 5th edition is stupid.
Obviously, we're playing this up just a little bit. He does not actually loathe the system with an intense hatred. He's just burnt out on it, and that's fair.
I'm very burnt out, especially because I used to have to run it rules as written because I ran Adventurers League at one of our local game stores. So I had no freedom to adjust anything.
And part of the reason we're doing this is, well, honestly, we've been wanting to do a good tabletop RPG episode for a while now because we're both huge nerds and love tabletop RPGs.
And also because, well, one of the common tropes in the tabletop RPG community is people trying to hack 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to do anything. Like, we're talking people like, oh, I want to run a dystopic, cyberpunk, vampire, romance political thriller. How do I edit 5th edition to do that?
And you don't. You run White Wolf.
Or you use Shadowrun. Shadowrun gives you enough of a basis that you could do that. Also, a quick side note, if there is rumbling in the background, we are currently experiencing a thunderstorm, so the mics might pick it up, but I don't think they are yet. And so we wanted to cover two different things on this episode. We want to cover the systems that give you an alternative to playing the high fantasy, power fantasy that is Dungeons and Dragons. And we also want to give you some alternatives for playing the high fantasy game that maybe aren't Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and I think the easier topic for us is going to be you don't need 5th edition for that. Now, let me preface. I actually really like 5th edition. Like, a lot.
It's a problem.
It's one of the easiest to pick up, and it's got just enough depth that you can really get in there and tinker a little bit under the hood without getting bogged down in far too much crunch.
On the flip side, personally, I find that the crunch level is too high for the restrictiveness of the system, because I find that there's not a lot of room to actually tinker without basically having to just house rule everything. And also, I find there are just a few too many things that are just left solely to GM discretion because they didn't bother writing rules for them.
All of which are things I actually like, so yeah. Anyway, 5th edition by itself is not a bad system overall. Not really. Not for what it does. But it is being put to task on things that it should not be. I say, as I am planning a modern fantasy game using 5th edition.
Well, modern fantasy in 5th edition isn't too bad. There are some problems with it.
The main problem is interactions with firearms.
Yeah.
They are way overpowered, especially at low levels.
That's one of the problems that you run into with any power fantasy RPG, honestly, is either firearms are hard to balance in a tabletop RPG.
They can be. That said, we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
Which does tend to happen with us, but I figured just this once we'd try to actually rein it in a little bit. The big thing is you have a fairly decent, easy to learn, easy to play system that's welcoming to people. And because of that, it's getting adapted to be used for things that it has no business being adapted to be used for.
Like a mecha versus kaiju game.
Oh, are you ready for this? Because my opening is a doozy.
What's that?
I have seen a 5th edition hack put together to run Cyberpunk Edge Runners in 5th edition.
You mean instead of just using Cyberpunk Red?
The system that series is based on? Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah. It's actually a bit of a meme in and of itself with the caption of, if only there was a system for that.
And we've also seen people try to hack 5th edition into Star Wars, which there was an old D20 Star Wars system that was based off of 3rd or 3.5.
Saga Edition. Sometimes I miss you, and then I remember you're based on 3 and 3.5.
I thought Saga Edition was the D6 one.
No.
Okay. I can't remember, but... And, of course, the problem with that is the same thing as the problem with trying to run 5th edition for Star Wars, because, yes, there's magic in Star Wars. I'm sorry. The Force. It's fucking magic, people.
They're fucking space wizards.
But the Force does not work the way D&D spellcasting does. You'd basically have to completely build an entirely custom set of spells for Force users. And even then, you're going to deal with the level-based system and the restrictions on how much they can be used, and.
And that's exactly what Saga Edition did.
Yeah, it did.
It kinda worked, but not really.
And it's like if you want to play Star Wars, you're so much better off playing a Star Wars RPG that was built from the ground up to be Star Wars.
Or built to incorporate things better.
Yeah.
However, FFG Star Wars still has one problem.
Yes, but you have an irrational hatred of fiddly dice.
It is not irrational. It is perfectly rational. Fiddly dice are dumb and stupid. No, actually, my real reason is fiddly dice are a gatekeeping mechanic. Not by design, but just by, they don't deliberately... Okay, let me rephrase. There are going to be some companies that do have proprietary dice so they can shill more money out of you. I don't think that's what Flying Frog was doing here, and I'm not going to imply...
Fantasy Flight, not Flying Frog.
Oh, Fantasy Flight? I get them mixed up. Anyway, Fantasy Flight. I don't think that's what Fantasy Flight was doing here, and we're not even going to imply that because please don't sue us.
Yeah, I honestly think that with Fantasy Flight's narrative dice system, it was built for the purpose of being a streamlined narrative. And the dice are beautiful for that. They really are. And I actually understand Grimm's issue with fiddly dice. They are indirectly a gatekeeping mechanic. They are much harder to use online because you need specialty systems for it. And they're also, if the company goes under or just stops printing them for a while or something like that, well, how are you supposed to get those dice?
Yeah. Not using standard dice, whether it's a full set of gaming dice or just D6s or whatever, it really kind of ensures that there's going to be a whole lot of group of people who may want to play your system that now they don't get to.
Yeah.
Because they can't afford the dice.
Or they can't find the dice. Or
there is one other thing with fiddly dice that is a little bit of a gatekeeping thing here. A barrier to entry is probably a better term now that I think of it. And that is a lot of games are run online now. And while you can get some of these custom dice sets in like a digital platform, there's extra hoops almost every time.
Yeah, there really are. Which, I mean, I mentioned that they're harder to use online.
Yeah. So there's that. I'm not going to say it's a bad system. I've played, I mean, it's based on Genesis.
Yeah.
I've played that system with you. It was a fun game, by the way. But that was my main complaint is fiddly dice. And the fucking things we had to jump through to get them to work right.
We didn't have to jump through anything once James was like, hey, you can use ours.
Yeah, but still.
Hey, which, by the way, quick shout out to Creative Play and Podcast Network. Yeah, if you like actual plays, go check them out.
Yeah. So I kind of already mentioned this one a little earlier as well, but there's a whole lot of people that are like, I want to do D&D with like, but it's like modern, but it's like political, but it's like we're all vampires. And just like that game exists. That system exists. It's called Vampire the Masquerade. It is part of a larger group of games known as the World of Darkness.
Ugh.
By White Wolf. Zulgar's not a fan.
Also, by the way, it's actually by Renegade Studios now.
No, they were still running the White Wolf imprint last time I heard, but yeah, the system has changed hands a lot.
Renegade might still be using the White Wolf name, but it's the parent company is now Renegade Studios, I know.
There have been a lot of studios that have owned this property. It's got a very strong fan base, but for some reason just keeps winding up in the hands of people who don't seem to understand why it has a fan base.
You mean like Battletech?
Fucking hell.
There is one other thing that should be mentioned here in terms of alternatives to D&D, and that is generic systems. There are quite a few out there.
There are.
And
I already named one.
Genesis,
mm-hmm.
which is, of course, the generic version of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars system. There is also, of course, GURPS,
mm-hmm.
the Hero system. more than I can ever keep track of varying degrees of complexity. And of course, the advantage of a generic system is you can do anything you want with it, and your party can know one system, and you can play a high fantasy, power fantasy like D&D. You can play a gritty realism, neo-noir vampire. You can play anything you want with it with the same rule set. Downside, of course, is that rule set is, well, it's generic. So sometimes things may not work as well as they would in a system specifically built for that.
Yeah.
And also, there is a lot more legwork on the part of the GM, because if you want to run a high fantasy game in Genesis, you've got some source books to get your basic high fantasy stuff, but you're going to also have to build a lot custom for it. Whereas Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, you can literally just grab a book and be like, hey, look at this, creatures.
Yeah. And there is one other thing that I consider kind of a barrier to entry for a lot of these. And this is more of a personal thing than a universal thing, but I do want to bring it up real quick, and that is progression. A lot of these systems do not have a lengthy, robust, actual, increase in power, unlock shiny new thing progression system past a certain point, which makes running long-form campaigns less rewarding for your players. That is, like I said, more of a personal thing, but I did want to mention it.
Yeah. And of course, there are a lot of, especially the generic systems, that do have really good, robust advancement. Say what you will about Genesis, but you can't deny that that system has a lot of room for advancement.
Oh man, if you're playing one of the official Genesis settings, like the Star Wars game we played, pick a concept, you can make it happen.
You might spend months or even years playing to fine-tune that concept because of all the things you need to spend XP to unlock.
So I'm not going to get too much of a derailment on that campaign, but I was playing a former clone trooper veteran who is now a mercenary on the Outer Rim. And that character's whole thing was long-range precision shooting. And I didn't need to work hard to make that happen. The stuff that character had. If I was taking a shot, I was probably hitting the poor dumb bastard I was aiming at. Like, there were a lot of really good little tricks and upgrades I could get to make that happen. And we didn't play that game that long, really.
Yeah, and also, I didn't have to custom make anything for Grimm's character.
Nope, it was all there, ready to go.
Everything was straight out of the book.
Yeah. If you're running just Genesis on your own setting, you're going to need to put a little more work into it.
But you do have source books that give you the basis for various advancements. So, like, if you're running fantasy, you've got the Terranoth book, which has what you need for running basic high fantasy. Or you've got the Android Shadow of the Beanstalk book, which is what you need for running a more gritty, realistic cyberpunk.
Yeah.
What other good systems are there we can mention for if you don't want to play classic high fantasy, power fantasy, and you want to build something else? Well, of course, there is a Star Trek system. There's a couple, in fact. The current one is Modiphice's 2D20 system.
Yep.
Which is also available in Fallout. At least I think Fallout's Modiphice.
Yes.
So if you want a post-apocalypse game, you got Fallout right there. Modiphice has a lot of stuff under theirs, including they also have Infinity, which is kind of a more kind of cyberpunk, gene-punk setting. It's a cool sci-fi setting.
Hey, I want to play a dark, gritty, doomed sci-fi future setting.
Wrath and Glory.
I play it every Sunday. It's great. Uses just D6s. It's wonderful.
The one thing to mention about that is it is based on Warhammer 40k.
Yeah.
So if you're not big into Warhammer 40k lore, might not be a good one for you.
No, but it is a really good game. I have enjoyed it a lot. Like, and the thing of it is, some of these are going to be more narrow in scope. Like, for example, the 2D20 Fallout game is obviously Fallout.
Yeah.
You can totally crib off of it to make your own apocalypse wasteland with it, sure, but you're going to be putting in work just like you would be with, say, Genesis or other systems at that point, because at that point you are kit bashing, basically.
Another alternative, if you want a dark, gritty sci-fi game, but maybe you don't want quite as heavy on sci-fi, and maybe you're not interested in the psyker powers, Alien. Free League has a beautifully done Alien RPG that you can use it to play Alien, but you can also use it to play just a gritty sci-fi.
Yeah.
They are also actually coming out with a Blade Runner RPG. I believe it's also Free League that's doing Blade Runner.
There's a lot of options.
Okay. I want to play a gritty, low fantasy RPG. We're talking like Conan or Game of Thrones.
Oh, I'm pretty sure we might be able to find a few things for you.
What are you thinking?
Well, let's see. Low fantasy, huh?
Yeah.
That is pretty easy to put together these days. There's Age. Fun part about Age is they also have modern rules and a custom sci-fi setting called Titan's Grave, created by Will Wheaton.
Nice. And of course, I'm pretty sure Burning Wheel does low fantasy pretty well.
Again, to crib off of your notes, Genesis would work with minimal kit bashing.
Yeah. Like I say, you can do anything with Genesis if you want. So, of course, also then GURPS, Hero System, etc.
Yeah.
Or, of course, there is one other generic system that we haven't mentioned that is another one that's very easy to do anything with. That is, it's a very polarizing system. Fate.
Yeah. Now, don't be wrong. Fate is great for telling a story together. I have played it repeatedly, and I've mostly enjoyed it, but I do have some foibles with it.
It's honestly not a great role-playing game. It's an outline for a cooperative shared narrative.
Yeah.
I realize that that is basically the same thing as an RPG, but it's not at the same time, you know?
Listen, okay, any system where if I punch you in the face or shoot you with a gun, the same thing can happen, we may have reduced things down to a little too basic.
So are you telling me that Fallout's a little too basic?
No, because they still have different outcomes. They have different damage, different modifiers. In Fate, you're literally more or less rolling the same thing every time. And your fist and your gun would deal the exact same potential for damage. And if that's what you're looking for, great. Fate's got you covered. It's really a robust storytelling system that allows you to really deal with certain levels of immersion as far as, like, you know, the aspect system where you invoke different aspects of yourself or your surroundings in order to manipulate the outcome of a role. It's really cool.
It's a great system for a bullshit artist.
It really is. I myself don't really enjoy it. I have used it to playtest settings to see if the settings work, and then adapted those settings to other systems later when I was ready to get a little more serious with them. Again, I'm not saying Fate's bad. It just doesn't do what I'm looking for from a system.
I'm actually not a fan of Fate either, but I also... It takes something very impressive for me to say that a tabletop RPG is genuinely bad. I have run into very few over the years that I think are legitimately bad.
Oh, there's also Cypher.
Cypher, yeah.
which I actually have the rulebook open right now, and they actually have sections with advice for running different genres like fantasy, modern, science fiction, horror, romance, superheroes, post-apocalyptic, fairy tale, historical. That is straight off the table of contents of that book.
Okay, I got another one for you.
Okay.
I want to play Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dresden Files, Supernatural.
Well, one, you can go back to Fate because there is an official Fate-powered Dresden RPG, or you can come on over to Monster of the Week.
Monster of the Week is actually one of my favorite games. It is the Powered by the Apocalypse system, so it's not great for a long-term progression campaign. But it's not built for that. Monster of the Week is designed for one-shots or basically a season of play. Anywhere from 6 to 15 sessions. There's not a lot of progression, but it's a really simple system to play, built on Powered by the Apocalypse. In fact, my introduction to Powered by the Apocalypse. And it's also so easy to build a character for. I can take a group that has never played it before and is indecisive and have everybody with a functional character in less than an hour. And that's because they're indecisive. If they know what they want, less than half an hour.
And like I said, some of these systems, that's what they're built for. They're built for this low-end, short-run stuff.
What if we want to play superheroes?
Mutants Masterminds, Hero System. There's a City of Heroes system out there, although it's kind of in my opinion, but it does exist. Like, you got options.
There are so many options for superheroes. You got Mutants and Masterminds, like Grim just mentioned. You've got the old Palladium. What the hell was that one called?
I don't remember what it was called, but
Palladium superhero game. There is an old White Wolf superhero game, Aberrant.
Yep, Aberrant. Yep. Okay, so I know we said that we weren't going to call any of these systems bad. No, I'm going to call Palladium bad. Character creation should not involve that many percentile dice.
Let's see, what else we got for superheroes? There is Masks, which is specifically designed for playing teenage superheroes. It's another Powered by the Apocalypse game.
I believe Marvel's currently playing with a system. Very basic system, but a system.
Yeah, there is a Marvel RPG. I think it might be out now. There is also AMP. It's one most people haven't heard of, but it's a small indie RPG that's built for playing superheroes. It's got a lot of flexibility to it. It's really designed for letting you make just about any hero you could imagine.
Yeah.
It's also not really good for a long-term game once again.
You know, Mutants Masterminds is pretty good, but it is
crunchy as fuck.
Which means you can build anything once you figure out how.
And it also means your GM has to go over everything with a fine-tooth comb to make sure, one, it's actually within the rules, and two, you haven't min-maxed to break the shit out of absolutely everything and completely ruin the game for everyone else.
I had a character who was part frost giant, and I never did it because it would be a terrible fucking idea. But she had enough points put into ice creation that she could create a mountain of ice and drop it on someone. Now, I didn't do that for a few reasons. One, that's not really fun in a cooperative gaming environment. Two, we all would have died as well because literal mountain of ice. And three, really takes the winds out of a GM sails when you try to pull super crap like that. I didn't need to do anything special to achieve that with that character. There was no weird broken build or exploit. She just did that. So, you know, be cautious.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those systems that you can do anything, but your GM's gotta be on point. And there is actually one other superhero system I want to mention, and that is the Sentinels of the Multiverse RPG.
Mm-hmm. That one does exist. It exists.
I think it's a really cool system if you're wanting to run a short thematic superhero game. I would not want to try to play a campaign of it. The advancement is a joke, honestly. Which is a shame because I love the Sentinels of the Multiverse.
So we've got... Okay. I want mechs.
Well, let's see. Obviously, we can do any one of the generic systems because they can do anything.
We also got Lancer and Mech Warrior.
Got Lancer, Mech Warrior.
There is a proper Mech Warrior RPG. Yes, there is.
And there is actually a few other ones. Oh, what's the name of that one that I've got? It's like Steel Wolf or something like that? I don't remember off the top. I could go find it on my game shelf if I wanted to. There's not a lot of other good mech ones. And one of the things that we have found with mech ones is that most of them, they're either too focused on the mech or the person inside the mech, and they don't give you a good capacity to customize both. And then, of course, for Grimm's problem, the few that do don't have great advancement. Because Lancer lets you customize both, but Lancer's not very good on the advancement front.
Yeah. The thing of it is, if I'm doing mechs, let me put it this way. I want Front Mission the RPG. I want Armored Core the RPG. I want to get in there and tinker with my machine. A lot. But I also don't want it to be super duper crunchy. So, I'm hard to please.
I bet we could do a decent mecha RPG in Powered by the Apocalypse, with the exception of not the greatest advancement, but it would give you plenty of room to tinker.
Yeah, there's plenty of room to tinker with that stuff. Powered by the Apocalypse is, another one that I've seen pop up a lot, not necessarily for mechs, but just as in general, is Savage Worlds.
Oh yeah, Savage Worlds is, of course, another very popular generic system. There's a Savage Worlds rules for Rifts. There's Savage Worlds rules for Pathfinder. Yes, you can play Pathfinder with Savage Worlds.
Don't forget Savage Worlds was used for Deadlands.
Yeah.
Specifically Deadlands Reloaded. While not out yet, I just want to do a quick shout out to some upcoming systems. If you're at all in touch with the tabletop RPG community, you know these are coming from not a big name in publishing, but a big name in tabletop spaces. They have the chance to become a big name in publishing, though, if they play their cards right. And that is Critical Role's two upcoming systems, Illuminated Worlds and Daggerheart. And these are two very different systems. And I like the fact that they're making these two very different systems. Illuminated Worlds is a D6 short form, so shorter campaigns, shorter progression, D6 dice pool system. And the main setting they're launching that with is this really cool kind of eldritch horror investigative setting. And then Daggerheart is going to be more of a traditional long-form RPG, but we don't have a whole lot of info on Daggerheart yet. Still very much in development, but I just wanted to name drop them real quick. That was a little longer than a little real quick, but I still wanted to give them a shout out.
Well, let's ask another one.
Mm-hmm.
I want to play Eldritch Horror.
Call of Cthulhu, Illuminated Worlds, any of the generic systems we've already discussed. Honestly, the World of Darkness books could give you some really good Eldritch Horror vibes because that is a modern horror fantasy listen, World of Darkness gets a little weird, okay? Just you got some great options for that.
Okay, but what if I want to play World War II Eldritch Horror?
Again, Call of Cthulhu. But there's a bunch that I am not an encyclopedia for this stuff, despite my affinity for Eldritch Horror.
Well, there is actually a system specifically for World War II Eldritch Horror. Achtung Cthulhu.
Of course.
Which is actually a Savage Worlds game.
Well, there you go. Okay, so we've talked a lot about some of the alternates for other genres.
I got one more.
All right. What do you got?
What if I want to play a steampunk game? Steampunk is actually one that's a little harder to get out there. There's not a lot of great steampunk RPGs, unfortunately.
There aren't. There are, of course, as we stated, the generic systems we've already discussed.
There is Tephra, which, quick shout out to Tephra here. They're a small independent RPG that was released several years ago and have continued building up over the years. I think it's a really cool system. There's not a lot of other ones. I mean, there's a few small indies here and there, but steampunk never really got big for RPGs, which always weirds me out a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. That said, there are a lot of systems that can be adapted to it with minimal ease.
Yeah. Minimal ease. That means it's really hard?
Yeah, I just shush.
I mean, we could sit here and just talk about non-D&D RPGs for hours and, like, completely different ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I could talk about a game that's built for playing a sapient magic item.
That exists.
I could talk about a game that's built for playing My Little Pony but dragons.
That also exists.
I own both of them in my collection.
I know you do.
I could talk about a game specifically built around the comic book series Usagi Yojimbo. That exists and is in my collection.
He has quite the collection, let me tell you.
I collect tabletop RPGs. It's what I do.
Okay, but what if I want to play Avatar: The Last Airbender?
That's a really hard one. I mean, you could probably hack Genesis for it or something, or you could just go buy the Avatar: The Last Airbender tabletop RPG, which is built on Powered by the Apocalypse, but actually modified a little bit for more streamlined combat rules. It's actually a really cool little system. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I really want to.
I want to name drop one more post-apocalypse system before we start moving on here, and that is Mutant Year Zero. By this point, it has multiple rules for multiple types of characters. You can build robots, you can build animal experiment mutant hybrids, you can build people that are just straight up mutants. It's really a lot of fun. But it's not everybody's cup of tea because your abilities that you get are kind of randomized. As you play, you develop random abilities, and for those of us who like to plan our character build ahead of time, that can be a little bit, of a showstopper, kind of a record scratch moment,
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't even touched on space opera that much, or because there's so much out there that you could do outside of generic high fantasy, but we're already sitting at about 45 minutes before I edit this, so...
Yeah. So, what if I want high fantasy?
Well, obviously, you could do Dungeons & Dragons, or you could do Pathfinder.
Those are the two big dogs right now, yep.
Now, let me ask you this question. What do you want from high fantasy? Do you want a long-term progression?
I personally would love a long-term progression.
Unfortunately, right now, if you want a long-term progression, high fantasy, your options are pretty limited outside of the big two and generic systems. I mean, Cypher has a high fantasy option, and if I understand, Cypher has decent progression.
It's okay. It's not my favorite, but it's okay.
I can't honestly think of any other good long-form progression high fantasy RPGs that are even or moderately well-known.
Depending on what power level you're looking for, there is one that comes to mind. It's not part of World of Darkness, but it is the same storyteller system, and that is Exalted. And Exalted gets nuts.
Isn't that the one for playing gods?
That's Scion.
Oh.
Which also exists. But Exalted you might as well be, because there are characters in Exalted who can just throw a mountain at someone. That is not an exaggeration.
Let's say you want to tone it back a little bit. You want something that's a little bit more short form. Let's say you're actually interested in playing a short form game. Well, you've got Dungeon World, which is one of the earlier Powered by the Apocalypse games, and it is basically high fantasy Powered by the Apocalypse. It's very much built for the classic dungeon crawl, hence the name Dungeon World. But it's built on a more simple system. Of course, It's kind of similar to Dungeons and Dragons because it's built on some of the older editions, but you could do Dungeon Crawl Classic. Dungeon Crawl Classic is great if you want a peasant grinder, sorry. If you want a peasant grinder, Dungeon Crawl Classic is one of the best ones for it.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with the term peasant grinder, it is basically a type of dungeon where everyone enters with level 0 peasants that have no class. Like the players, they have no class either. Haha.
Especially if I'm at that table.
You have like a stack of character sheets. And you're going through this dungeon and you're just, one dies, you bring in the next one, and you keep going until you either make it through or you all run out of characters.
Joke's on you. I'll never run out of characters.
Peasant grinders aren't my style. I'm not a big fan of high lethality games, but some people love peasant grinders. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And now for a comment you're probably going to edit out. And some people vote Republican.
There is something wrong with that.
So the point here is you got a lot of options for a lot of things. Real quick, I want to give a shout out to previous editions of D&D. I love 5th edition. It is, for me, the right combination of quick and easy and approachable.
4th edition was, of course...
4th edition was a solid tabletop system that was not D&D and should have been marketed as something else. If it had been marketed as anything else, it would have been brilliant.
If they'd even marketed it as Dungeons and Dragons Tactics.
Yeah. You're still getting the brand recognition, but it's not...
Because it really was a tactical combat game.
And it was great at it. And it brought in a whole bunch of really cool elements that hadn't been seen in TTRPGs at the time, like cribbing off of online gaming to include, your class fills this role. You all have these powers that do this stuff. And a lot of good things did come out of 4th edition, don't get me wrong. Cantrips, as they act now, I believe that started in 4th edition.
It did.
It also standardized the Warlock as one of the main classes. It was introduced in 3.5 in a splat book, but 4th edition standardized it as part of the core classes.
4th edition was also the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons to start realizing that maybe we should balance things to each other a little bit better. So, first of all, first level in 4th edition is not suicide like it is in pretty much any of the previous editions. Especially not for spellcasters. And 4th edition also really tried to give martial characters interesting things to do to remain relevant at high levels. Which honestly is one of my complaints with 5th edition because they rolled back on that.
Yeah. I am all for developers, whether they're developing a tabletop RPG or a video game or what have you, reaching out a little bit, stepping out of the comfort zone, trying new things. And 4th edition had enough stuff in it that just didn't work for a lot of players.
That said, it does still have its contingent of firm supporters.
And more power to them.
Yeah, if you have fun playing the RPG you play, great.
So, 3rd edition / 3.5 is very robust, which is its strength and its weakness.
Especially by the end of its life, it was such a bloated mess that you could break so easily. I kid you not when I say that in 3.5, I could start as a first level human fighter, and by I believe it was 6th level. It's been a little while since I figured this one out, but I think it was 6th level. I could be a 4-weapon fighter because I grew tentacle arms.
Tentacle arms. Oh, wait, this isn't that kind of podcast.
That was one of the least broken things you could do in 3.5. Do not even get me started on the Book of Nine Swords.
There was a game that you ran that I only made it through half a session, where I made a human fighter focused on a two-handed weapon. And I could have easily made just a broken, min-maxed monstrosity that would have made any munchkin proud. And I held back a little bit. Because I was just like, yeah, I want to be awesome, but I want to make everybody else at the table feel like there's no reason for them to be there. Again, that cooperative part of playing a tabletop RPG. It's kind of important.
Just a little bit.
And one of the other players showed up with something so devastatingly broken that he one-shot the commander of the first encounter. And I just went, I'm out. Bye. There's no reason for me to be here.
I don't even remember that game, but what's a memory?
That was one of your Dragon King attempts. I don't know if you even remember that storyline.
No.
But yeah, this was ancient history. Yeah, it was very easy to break things in that system because you had so many tools to work with. And I loved that customization, but it's so crunchy. There are so many numbers. And so many numbers to make your other numbers be more numbers.
Which we can't talk about D&D 3.5 without mentioning what it spawned.
Giant migraine for everyone involved?
Well, there's that, but with 4th edition, a lot of people were very unhappy with 4th edition and wanted to keep playing 3.5 or similar. So this little tiny company that was only previously known for making adventures for 3.5 and see the occasional splat book, decided that they were going to make their own 3.5 with blackjack and hookers.
Yeah. They're still around today. They're a tiny little indie company, nothing too extravagant.
Except, of course, they were the founding force behind the new Orc license that is basically an open gaming license in response to Hasbro's bullshit about the 5th edition OGL.
Yeah.
We are, of course, talking about Paizo and their game Pathfinder.
Which later spun off into Starfinder, which is an also fun take on things. I just wish it had more love.
And, of course, then Pathfinder 2nd edition came out a few years back, and frankly, I think it's one of the best high fantasy tabletop systems that's come out yet. But let's travel back in time.
All right. Oh, one quick thing. A lot of, for lack of a better word, ancillary spin-offs started in 3rd edition, and one of my favorites back then was the D20 Modern system because they had splat books for 1,000,000,001 settings. You wanted apocalypse, you had that. You wanted sci-fi, you had that. You wanted mech, you had that. They really embraced other genres with these spin-offs, and I kind of wish they'd go back to doing that.
Do you remember the old 3.5 source book that was produced by Goodman Games? Dragon Mech.
Yep. There was Dragon Mech. There was Iron Kingdoms.
Which Iron Kingdoms is actually still around. It's no longer a D&D property. It's actually its own thing now. The Iron Kingdoms campaign setting is a setting I love. I love that gritty mage punk setting.
How many times did I come to you on a campaign and be like, can I have this gun from Iron Kingdoms?
No.
But
it is an awesome setting, and I've heard good things about the most recent edition of the system for it, too.
One of these days I might need to get off my keister and go check that out. But anyway, so yeah, 3rd had a very robust, it was, if not the first, one of the first that had an open gaming license, which means everybody went nuts.
It was the first one with an open gaming license. And interestingly enough, this was back when Wizards of the Coast owned D&D. They had just recently bought the license. And this was before Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast. So back in those glory days when Dungeons and Dragons was made by gamer nerds for gamer nerds. And they looked back at all of the bullshit that TSR had done with trying to shut down any third-party thing for second edition. And they're just sitting there like, why? If more people buy other things, or more people make other things for our system, we're going to sell more of our system.
They basically were one of the first tabletop RPG publishers to take a look and figure out the console trick. We're referring, of course, to video games. Hey, if we build a platform and let other people build stuff to run on that platform, we're going to sell that platform.
More to the point, they learned the same lesson that Microsoft did in the Microsoft-Apple war back in, what was it, the 80s?
Depending on who you ask, that war is still ongoing, but
In the home computer portion of that, Microsoft won. The reason Microsoft won that is because Microsoft looked and said, okay, we want to make an operating system. Make software for it. Anybody who wants to can make software for it. They can release anything they want on our system. And honestly, Google has done the same thing with Android. The Android system is open platform. Anyone can release something for Android. And even if you can't get it on the Android app market, you can go in, poke one setting and say, yes, I want to be able to install games from other sources. Install programs from other sources.
Yep.
Apple, you gotta freaking jailbreak your device to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the reasons that 3.5, or 3rd edition and then 3.5, became one of the biggest, most successful tabletop RPGs ever. And I think it's part of the reason that we see so much focus on the idea of hacking 5th edition to do that. Because there were books to do that for 3.5.
And that leaves us with one more thing. You can, if you want, go ahead and go back and run Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, also known as 2nd edition, if you want to.
Why would you?
But I'm going to leave you and the Thaco locked in a room together, baby, and one of you is coming out, and it's probably not fucking you, okay?
And of course, if you really want to, you can even go back as far as the original white box.
But again, why would you want to?
I have actually held the original white box in my hand once. I worked in a game store. We had a copy for a while. It was cool.
Did you throw it in a fire?
I was tempted to. This one was so old, it actually had Dave Arneson's name on it.
Wow. Before the Gygaxing.
Yeah.
But we're not going to get into that.
If you don't know what we're talking about there, just take a quick moment and Google, let's say Google Secrets of Blackmore.
Sure. And that's about as much as we're going to get into that because we're already been talking for an hour.
I could rant about that for at least another 20 minutes if I wanted to.
That could be a separate episode, honestly, if you pay us. If you want that spicy rant, show us the money. Make it rain.
Hey, this would be a good moment to plug our Ko-fi, where you can actually go online and pay us to do your choice of episode. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Indeed. All right, well, that's it for this week.
If you like what we do, you can leave a rating, review, comment, and all that other fun stuff on your favorite podcatcher.
You can also support us on Patreon for special bonus content and episodes a week early, or tip us on Ko-fi, or just flat out buy our loyalty on Ko-fi. We're cheap.
We're very cheap.
You can find those and our social media platforms and Discord server in the show notes. There you are.
Graham, what the fuck is wrong with you this time?
Nothing, my good sir. You see, it is just... I am now a patron of the arts.
Okay, the fuck is he on this time?
I have supported a noble artiste in her stalwart pursuits. Surely you wish to do the same, Quite.
The fuck are you on about this time?
Surely if you enjoy art and support the arts, you will reach out to a creative yourself and support their endeavors. Yes? I heartily recommend Tundra Katie Bean.
So, wait, you mean the artist who made our logo?
Indeed.
Grim, I already know I can support her on Ko-fi and Patreon under the name Tundra Katie Bean.
Then my work here is done. I shall now retire for an evening constitutional.
Which apparently for him means stagger into bed. Well, I guess he wasn't entirely wrong. Just crazy. You can, in fact, support the very same artist who made our logo on Ko-fi and Patreon. Once again, that was Tundra Katie Bean.
And her patrons get first crack at new art before public sale.
Well, lead with that next time, you dingbat.
Last but certainly not least, we want to give a quick shout out to all of our supporters on Patreon and Ko-fi, especially these idiots.
That would be Random Warrior, Rain, and the perpetually banned Athen Mortis, who needs to roll for initiative. The guards are coming for you.